September 2nd, 31 BC. Cleopatra's and Mark Antony's fleet, once a mighty force, is obliterated by Octavian's far superior navy. With their dreams of victory shattered, they barely escape the battle, retreating to the sanctuary of Alexandria. Betrayed by their allies, abandoned by friends, their reign hangs by a thread. The end is near, a fact they must face. But to understand how the great god queen of Egypt, once the most powerful woman in the world, lost it all, we must go back to where it all began. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, heir to the legendary Ptolemaic dynasty, a dynasty drowning in decadence and corruption. From a young age, she was no stranger to ambition. She devoured knowledge, learning languages, the history of her people, and the brutal truth that Egypt was nothing without Rome. Alexandria was a city like no other, an unparalleled hub of science and culture. Here, Cleopatra would be molded into a political weapon of unmatched power. She embraced the ancient Egyptian traditions, identifying herself with the goddess Isis, ascending beyond a mortal ruler to become a divine god-queen, revered and feared by all who saw her. But before she could rise as Isis incarnate, Cleopatra needed to secure the throne, and she would not hesitate to betray those closest to her to do so. At the age of 18, she ascended the throne, but the rule of Egypt was not so simple. Tradition demanded she marry her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and rule as his co-regent. But Cleopatra, hungry for power, found the thought of sharing her throne with a mere child unbearable. To rule, she would have to eliminate her brother. But with advisors loyal to Ptolemy, Cleopatra's life was in danger. Fearing for her life, she fled Egypt, knowing that if her brother's forces captured her, she would be executed. Desperation and fate seemed to conspire against her, but luck smiled on Cleopatra. Her brother made a catastrophic error. Hoping to win Caesar's favor, Ptolemy ordered the execution of Pompey, Caesar's greatest rival. Expecting Caesar to be pleased, he instead enraged the Roman general. This act of cruelty ignited Caesar's wrath. An opportunity revealed itself for Cleopatra's return. Seizing the chance, Cleopatra smuggled herself into Caesar's camp, concealed inside a carpet. When Caesar unrolled the fabric and saw the young queen, her beauty and wit captivated him. In a heartbeat, Cleopatra had won the most powerful man in the world. But Cleopatra's rise came with deadly consequences. Caesar tried to negotiate with Ptolemy, offering him a peaceful resolution. But the young king, terrified of losing his throne, declared war. Despite Ptolemy's numerical advantage, Caesar's forces held strong until reinforcements arrived. Cornered, Ptolemy attempted to flee the battlefield, but the Nile River would not save him. Caesar's superior fleet sank his boat, and the last of Cleopatra's enemies drowned in the waters of Egypt. With her brother's death, Cleopatra emerged victorious, Egypt's god-queen, ruler of all she surveyed. She had secured her reign and her legacy, making her the most iconic woman in history. With Julius Caesar at her side, Cleopatra sealed Egypt's independence, ushering in an era of prosperity. She was not just a queen, she was a force of nature, a ruler who bent the course of history to her will. Obsessed with knowledge, Cleopatra amassed the greatest library the world had ever seen in Alexandria. Unlike her predecessors, she spoke not just Greek, but 7 languages, impressing even the most powerful rulers of the age. Cleopatra and Caesar's union produced a son, Caesarion, who would one day carry both Egyptian and Roman blood. He was the key to her future, and the linchpin that would secure her throne in both Rome and Egypt. But Cleopatra was not just a ruler of Egypt. She was a strategist. To eliminate threats to her throne, she had her brother, Ptolemy XIV, assassinated, and her son was crowned co-ruler. Her sister, Arsinoe, the last challenger to the throne, was silenced forever, banished from Egypt, bound to the temple of Artemis. But as quickly as Cleopatra's fortunes had risen, they began to crumble. While in Rome, Caesar was struck down by a group of senators, and the world she had built with him was shattered. She made a swift decision to flee, fearing she would be next. Alone and desperate with no one to turn to, Cleopatra turned to another Roman general, Mark Antony. Her allure was undeniable. Antony, intrigued and curious, fell under her spell. But Cleopatra wasn't just after a lover, she needed an ally. Once Antony was enthralled, she manipulated him into sending an assassin to eliminate her sister, Arsinoe, ensuring no one could stand in her way. Cleopatra and Antony lived in excess, indulging in feasts and pleasures. Their debauchery knew no bounds, and soon the rumors reached Rome. When Octavian, Caesar's heir, learned that Antony would leave control of Rome to his and Cleopatra's children upon his death, he could not stand by and watch. He waged a war of propaganda, branding Antony as a traitor and Cleopatra as a foreign temptress who had seduced not one, but two Roman generals. The stage was set for a final showdown. Octavian declared war, and the two sides mobilized their armies. The battle would be decided at the Battle of Actium. The war raged on the land, but the final chapter was written on the sea. Octavian's fleet, far stronger and better equipped, crushed Antony and Cleopatra's forces. The defeat was decisive. In their final months, Antony and Cleopatra threw lavish parties, indulging in the finest luxuries life had to offer. But even in their last moments, the shadow of death loomed. They knew their time was up. As Octavian's army closed in on Alexandria, Cleopatra barricaded herself in her palace, prepared to destroy her riches rather than let them fall into enemy hands. She even attempted to surrender in secret to Octavian, but he rejected her offer and instead would have her paraded as a trophy and executed in Rome. In a final, desperate act, Cleopatra spread a rumor of her suicide, hoping to lure Antony to her side so they could die together. But when Antony, believing his queen had perished, couldn't stand the news of her passing, and in rage fell on his sword, mortally wounding himself. Cleopatra's heart broke. She had him brought to her, dying in her arms. With Antony dead and her reign in ruins, Cleopatra refused to face her captor. She decided to face death on her own terms. The legend says she had her maids bring her a deadly snake to poison herself. And with that final act, the God Queen's life ended. Egypt's independence died with her. Her children with Antony vanished into the fog of history, while her son with Caesar was most likely murdered by Octavian, ending any hope of a new dynasty. The story of Cleopatra's rise and fall is one of love, betrayal, and tragedy. Her life was a masterpiece of ambition and passion, crowned with a devastating end. She is remembered not just as a queen, but as a legend, the most famous woman in history whose name will never be forgotten.